Hola, soy Sachi, soy estadounidense, tengo 32 años y actualmente vivo en Colombia. I always had the idea that I would be bilingual one day. I had this future vision of myself as someone who could speak two languages at least. And for a long time, I was studying Japanese in school. And when I was about 19, I realized that I didn't want to live in Japan. So I stopped taking Japanese and I didn't study another language until I started Duolingo Spanish when I was 28 at the beginning of 2020 in the pandemic. I decided to learn Spanish mostly because I thought it would be practical. There are a lot of people in the US who speak Spanish, especially in the part of Colorado where I used to live, and I thought that it would be really cool to be able to communicate with them. Not to mention the millions and millions of people who live in the rest of the Americas who speak Spanish. I just figured that having Spanish as my second language would open a world of possibilities. I also had the long-time dream of traveling solo. I really wanted to do a long-term solo trip from when I was about 19 years old, and I just never really made it happen. Life got in the way, I guess, and I sort of pushed this dream off to the side until the pandemic came around and I realized that it was time to start doing the things that I had promised myself I would do. So I started to learn Spanish with the idea that I would travel in Latin America once I could. For the first year or so of my journey learning Spanish, I was pretty much only using Duolingo, which I have a lot of nice things to say about Duolingo. They do a good job with encouraging consistency and teaching vocabulary and helping you to make your language learning a part of your daily life. The gamification is cool, but I don't think that it does a very good job of teaching you to speak, which is an understandable limitation. So by the time that I was ready to begin my big trip in Latin America, I had been studying Spanish on Duolingo and other apps for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and I had not actually had a conversation with anyone ever. So I decided to begin my trip in Guatemala, where they're known for having the most affordable Spanish language schools, where you can spend a few hours a day having one-on-one lessons with an instructor. You can stay in a homestay, and I did that for about a month. I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a great experience, and it was what I needed to be able to kind of put the pieces together from what I knew from Duolingo and be able to actually produce speech and respond to something that someone else was saying to me that wasn't, a pre-programmed set of phrases that I had heard several times before. And even though that was the most affordable option for what I was looking for, in retrospect, it wasn't the most affordable option. You need to be able to take time off work, you need to be able to fly to Guatemala to study, and I only did it for a month. I don't think it's something that I would have been able to sustain for longer than that. The aspect of learning Spanish that I think has been most frustrating for me is finding myself in what feel like plateaus, where, for example, especially after I had been traveling for a few months, and I felt like I had learned quite a bit, but I wasn't getting better as fast as I wanted to. I wasn't learning at an accelerated rate. I felt like I was kind of stuck. So I decided that it was time to be a little bit more intentional. My solution when I found myself in a plateau was to sign up for BaseLang. I met a guy while I was traveling, another guy from the US, who told me that he had done a lot of research and found that BaseLang was probably the most cost-efficient way to be really serious about language learning. And so I took him at his word and I signed up. And I found that it was really helpful to have the structure available. Instead of having to guide my own learning, I could follow the curriculum. With BaseLang, I've been able to have the same kind of individualized attention and real-time feedback that I got in the Spanish school in Guatemala, but on a schedule that was a lot more flexible, a budget that was a lot more flexible and more achievable for me, and with a lot more variety of instructors, which I've personally really appreciated. Y si me preguntas cómo me ha impactado aprender el español, pues me ha cambiado la vida por completo. Estoy viviendo en un nuevo país. Durante mis viajes he podido hablar con muchísimas personas que no hablan inglés y he podido tener conversaciones reales, interesantes con ellos. Y hoy en día estoy convirtiéndome en la persona que siempre quería ser. So, would I recommend learning Spanish on BaseLang? Yes, absolutely. I think if you've been learning on a platform like Duolingo, what's really missing is that conversational aspect. Being able to generate thoughts and convert them into sentences in the absence of some kind of script is invaluable, and it's super important for communicating Spanish in the real world. I also think that BaseLang is the best value for your money. If you have the time to dedicate and you're really serious about learning, it's definitely the lowest cost per hour that I have found. I also think that the flexibility that BaseLang offers is incredible. Being able to schedule a class a few minutes ahead of time with a native Spanish speaker who's trained in the curriculum is incredibly valuable and has been perfect for the lifestyle that I've been leading recently.